It's the SDG Podcast. Before we get started, you can check us out on the web at solutiondesign.com/podcast or find us on all the social medias, LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Solution Design Group. We're back for another podcast. Is everybody excited?
Always.
Absolutely.
We're here with Peter Lawrence, and we got Chad Juttner today. And joining us again, our special guest, Camille Westfall, who is going to talk to us about dark patterns.
Spooky.
Is this a Halloween theme?
Yeah.
Is this our Halloween podcast?
Yeah. We're going to go dark in the depths of UI, UX, and other things. So, Camille, explain to us what a dark pattern is, if you don't mind.
Absolutely. You might also know them by the name deceptive patterns, is also a name that's thrown out there. The main tenet is that they manipulate users to do things they don't want to do.
So it's like exercise?
There could be dark patterns used to make you exercise. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. But basically that's the gist of it, is manipulating users to do things that they don't want to do.
My example that I think of is shopping online, and it's so easy to buy stuff and so hard to return it, so difficult, or to get help about something. To call somebody and get a human on the phone is really difficult.
Absolutely.
They're experiencing higher than average call volumes, Kyle.
Yeah,
Always.
but their call is important to us.
Yes. That could be known as one of the types of dark patterns that exist out there, known as obstruction or deliberate misdirection. So when you're putting barriers in front of a user to get to the action that they want, that's actually part of a dark pattern.
So that would include like a chat bot you're interacting with that is not giving you like the options you need
Right.
to go further. It's like,
Correct.
It's trying to narrow down your problem. And there's like, well, I need other, or I need human, or I need, it's a network issue I want to talk about. So is it yogurt or spam? It's like, you're a tech site. What are these? I don't know. They're trying to keep me away. What else? Do you have any other examples? Anything you can think of, Peter?
Anything I can think of? I can think of lots of dark patterns. I mean, the world is practically built of dark patterns, isn't it? I mean,
Yeah, they're everywhere.
They really are. But that's not the only type of dark pattern, right? There's others.
Yeah, absolutely. So we just talked about obstruction and deliberate misdirection, but the one that you might be most familiar with is forced continuity. This is one that's super common. This is things like when you sign up for a free trial and then not getting a warning before you're charged. So it's up to putting it on the user to make sure that they're not charged before they are. And it can also fall under this category of like subscription traps, right? Interfering with the way to get out of a subscription, out of that free trial. So things like Audible and Adobe are pretty notorious for this kind of thing. But that's forced continuity. That's another really common type that you'll find.
It's funny you should use both those examples. If anybody wants an audiobook, I have extra credits that I'm going to lose. And I had to negotiate to get reimbursed because something was continued on without a chance for us to renegotiate. And there was no announcement or anything from a different
Camille,
company.
I just got a new cellular telephone, right? New case. My wife she's not featured on it anywhere. Oops, my fault. But as when you get one, so Apple gives you all the free subscriptions for 3 months, right? And so this is an example of what you're just talking about, right? Where
Yes.
it's like, hey, sign up for 3 free months of Apple News Plus. Am I being manipulated right now? Because I signed up. So on January 25th, I just left myself a reminder in the same phone to say, hey, remind me to cancel everything on January 24th.
Right. Yeah.
But that's an example of your forced continuity, right?
It is absolutely. So users still have the ability to cancel, right? Like if you think ahead and you mark your calendar, you have things outside of the purview of that system in order to remind you to go do the thing that you don't want to happen, right? That's the key. So you are being manipulated into, they're hoping that you'll just like the service so much that you'll forget that it's on autopay and it's continuing. They're forcing you basically without external action to like keep going.
I'm totally going to forget. And I feel like there's an entire little micro industry that has popped up to service people like me that eventually forget all of these things they sign up for like this. And because I see it advertised all the time, a little thing where it's like, hey, do you pay for too many subscriptions? And I'm like, yes, I do. And then they're like,
Yes.
subscribe to our service. That'll tell you. And I'm like, you almost got me there because this is just going to be another thing.
So do
Yeah.
like rebates and gift cards fall into kind of that category?
It depends on how they're sold to you, right? So you could think of this, some of these forced continuity things as kind of a sales tactic. It's a shady one because the user isn't like involved in the process of consent. But it is a sales tactic to get more sales. So if the gift cards are kind of sold to you like without you asking for them, without you taking action to get them, that, it falls into more of a manipulative pattern.
I was thinking about how they kind of prey on human nature. Yeah, we'll have the rebates and the gift cards, and they'll never get used or turned back in.
Governor Tim Walz just made it famous countrywide about he had the number wrong, but the 11% Menards rebate, right?
Menards!
He actually said that's part. What did he say? He said that's part of his retirement plan is sending in all his rebates.
And the Menards one is great because you are purchasing something at that establishment. You still have to do something to get the rebate. Like you have to fill out a form.
Right.
So it's not really shady in that way. It's like you'd still have to remember to do it to get the discount,
Yeah.
So you're involved in that process.
But I think there is a built-in human factor of X number of percent are going to fail to fill this out. Therefore, it works in our favor to offer this more.
For sure. But
yeah, why not just
that's
give
the user
discount?
deciding not to do it, right?
Right.
Yeah, I mean, you could, right? You could decide as a business what direction you'd want to go if the user should fill out a little bit of extra paperwork or not, right? You might want to put a little bit of obstruction in the way of that discount that you're advertising for business reasons. And that might be a little bit of a bait and switch in a sense. So that's something that users need to be aware of, right? I think for the Menards one, it's pretty clear. Like they have the signage everywhere. You know how to get the rebate. There's no barriers to picking up the piece of paper after you grab your receipt, right? So it would be a much worse example of like a much worse dark pattern if you couldn't get to that rebate form ever, like, or you had to call someone on a call tree to get it, right?
Yeah, they're kind of giving you everything you need, and then it's really up to you if you're going to fail or not.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
So in that sense, they're not necessarily manipulating you too much. They're relying on you to use the tools that they've provided you, right?
But they could just subtract 11% or hand me a check that says next time, here's 11% of your purchase.
Right. They could automatically apply it to your next time you're in, right? But,
we mentioned two now. There's obstruction and there's continuity. Are there more than that?
Oh, absolutely. And I'm kind of summarizing too. I mean, there are organizations that have put lists out there, like the Department of Consumer Affairs has a 10-item list of these different patterns. I've sort of summarized them into 4 general categories. So the third one would be confirm shaming. So this is something like, you've probably seen this too. Basically, it's guilting you into not canceling. So you have to click something like, no, I hate you, or no, I don't want free money, or no, I don't want free donuts to cancel.
Yeah.
So it's shaming you into doing what you want, what the business wants you to do, which is continue, right? And sometimes this can be really like hidden. So LinkedIn for a long time didn't have an opt out from importing your contacts. They had a tiny little skip this step like link. And instead of saying that it like when you click that skip that step link, instead of saying, oh, skip importing your contacts, are you sure? It asked, skip seeing who you already know, which doesn't mention anything about importing your contacts, which is super shady. So those are things that like really are shaming the user into thinking, oh, I should be doing this. Like, this is the right thing to do.
That's
Can I ask
just
a question?
devious.
It sounds like there's a negative connotation associated with all of these practices, right? And probably rightfully so. Are there any times you can think of that it might actually be beneficial for the end user? I have one example in mind that I take advantage of all the time, right? And so this is the continuity thing that you were talking about. I've subscribed to the New York Times since forever. I never pay full price for it because I remind myself to cancel, and it goes through all of these steps in the cancellation process. And it's like kind of what you're talking about, right? Like the first step is like, what the heck is wrong with you? You don't like quality journalism. And I'm like, no, I don't like it. And then they're like, are you sure? Because like, did you want to see our Pulitzers? They're all there. I'm like, yeah, I'm sure you guys are great. And then the very last step, if I can stick with it, is, well, what if we gave it to you for $1 a month for the next 12 months? And I'm like, that's the step I was like. And so, yes, I was shamed. I had to tell them they suck. I didn't want to see their little trophies. But at the end of it, I was able to keep it for $1. And it feels like that's good for me, kind of. I mean, they didn't need to say all the other stuff, but, whatever.
Right.
So
they didn't need to. So that's the main thing, right? It's like there's some manipulation there to try and get you to continue the full price subscription when if you wanted to cancel, they could make that offer to you right away. It's putting these steps in your way and making you feel like you should be paying full price before they're like, oh, well, just like try this for a little bit and then we'll talk later, right? So there's a little bit of manipulation there. That's the only thing that is really the problem with these techniques is that there's manipulation there that is hidden from the user of like the real thing that's happening, the real options that they have. And like a lot of times for confirm shaming, this can work really well for some contexts and positive for both the business and the user for things like a learning platform that gives you a little bit of confirm shaming, like, I guess this is goodbye forever when you haven't opened your Duolingo app in 30 days. That's good because it reminds you still have the app and you should be using it to learn, and it helps you get back on your learning journey or whatever it might be, and it helps the business with the metrics of people opening the app and using the app. There are instances where this sort of manipulative tactic can be used to not a manipulative evil end, but an end where both parties can be happy.
That's number 3.
Ready for the fourth one?
I was going to say, it's funny you mentioned Duolingo because I've got a leaf blower going, so I'm trying to mute. And Duolingo offers this 14-day trial, but they also tell you, and will remind you in 12 days that you're going to start paying in 2 days, right? So they're familiar with the dark pattern and they're trying to maybe get it a little bit more towards the light pattern of things. Yeah, like instead of seeing it as like something else that you have to put into your onboarding process for the user, you could see it as another opportunity to talk to the user about how great their experience has been right before that they're charged, right? And so I think that's the difference between the two, right? So you can still, use the same model, but have a different type of messaging. And a lot of this is messaging, psychological, how you're engaging with the user. So yeah, that's a really good example as well. Do you see like signing someone up for 401ks when you first start out at the company, or automatically signing you up for the 1% increase every year over year? Is that a dark pattern, or is that a light pattern, or a dark pattern disguised as, or you know what I'm trying to say? Is that, because it's kind of using a dark pattern, but
I think again, it's all about transparency, and if there's manipulation there. Like if the user doesn't know what they're agreeing to, and it's hard to read the terms, it's hard to understand what they're signing up for. This can be kind of termed under the fourth type, which is misinformation. So misinformation can include things like false urgency, basket sneaking, which is kind of close to what you're talking about, where there's like extra items snuck in, hidden costs, or also bait and switch. So even disguised ads can sometimes fall into this, where basically you're telling the user one thing and then there's something else happening that they don't expect.
Adobe Acrobat Reader, the free version, it used to be when you went to install it on this link to run the installer. And then typically when you run an installer, it gives you the options of what you want to install. But with that, it was actually on that page, there was another thing you had to click on to do the customization, which was to remove the McAfee antivirus trial.
Yeah.
So if you didn't do that before the installer ever even ran, then you were going to get that thrown in your cart for you.
Yep, classic. Classic example from Adobe. They're one of the biggest ones that do these kind of things for some of the subscription stuff that they run. And they've been called out like publicly about it. So it's something to, watch for as a consumer. And something that, it's really hard for us as consumers to like not get desensitized to checking I approve and I have read the policy of the privacy policy and terms and conditions, right? It makes it really easy for us to just check that box and then move on. But it's important to read those things, particularly for new services that you're you're just signing up for. So
are the links of terms and conditions a form of this as well then? Like if
as long as they're accessible, they're not. If you can't click on it, you can't. Or I've seen sometimes too where the background color is the same color as the link. That's really
nice.
bad. So you can't click on that, right? So as long as you can click on it, you can open it, you can read it in a reasonable manner on a reasonable number of devices. I would say that like having that checkbox there is not necessarily a dark pattern because you're not like forcing the user, manipulating the user to not read it, right?
They're saying they read it. They're agreeing. I did it.
They have the opportunity to look at the information, right? Some of the best places that do this, like the checkbox thing, will also have those policies available to the user at any time, even before they sign up and even after they sign up. That's a light pattern, I guess you could say.
But I feel like having, 50 pages of terms and conditions seems to be a little bit, obviously you want to cover every possible condition, but seems a little bit excessive for the average user to read a book before they accept the terms and conditions.
Yeah, absolutely. And that kind of, it's not necessarily a dark pattern, but it's something that has been growing in momentum for the past, 20 so years on the internet, is this idea of plain language being a part of terms and condition options for users. So they can read in plain English, not legalese, what they're signing up for and what they're, signing their life away to, right? Kind of separate from dark patterns, though, but sort of similar in a way, right? Because you're kind of hiding some things.
Purposefully complicating things is a dark pattern.
Right.
Whatever they got to do, burying it at the bottom of something as an afterthought, people are likely going to drop before they get to the end. All the critical, sneaky stuff is going to be toward the end. Have you ever been asked to implement a dark pattern?
Luckily, no. There's definitely been discussions about, from the UX writing standpoint, how do we make sure that users are going the direction that they probably should go and being led in the way that they need to be led without being manipulated. So we talk about that of like what word choices are we using. I would say I haven't been asked directly to manipulate a user and make them feel something about the thing that they're clicking. So I feel lucky in that way. But if I was asked, I would present this evidence of a lot of these dark patterns are considered manipulative. Users don't feel the best about the brand after they've been exposed to these, and so it can erode trust. It can erode the experience, as well as a law was just passed recently about the click to cancel being as easy as it is to sign up. So it's something that businesses should be aware of, that if we are going to put all these steps in front of users, laws can change and users can voice their concerns and things can be made easier. So it's something to take into consideration, even if you think that doing them is not necessarily bad, which it isn't necessarily bad, like we talked about. But it's that knowledge and being aware of what it's leading to. What are you manipulating the user to do? Are you trying to manipulate actually, or are you just trying to show them the right path or show them what they're looking for? Those are, different ways to get to the same end, right?
Let's talk about IKEA. Is a trap, a store trap where they get you in there and it's a maze and you can't get out until you get to the end. And halfway through you freak out, and so you go full Godzilla and just beeline through everything, fixtures, knocking over racks, things like that.
They have shortcuts.
They have shortcuts. They're hidden shortcuts. Yeah, there's a little bit of psychology there, right? So I don't know. I think it falls in the gray area. You can still get out, right? It's not like a Halloween maze where you are going to be jump scared by a sales associate and you literally can't get out till you give them your left leg, right? So luckily, it's not like that. You have the option to find other ways to get around, to get where you're going. So
there was a time a local electronics store would have 50, 60 employees, and you couldn't get from one end to the other without 15 jump scares for people wanting to help. I miss those days.
It's a free haunted house.
Yeah. So, the deceptive nature of the dark patterns, I have seen some things change a little bit where, if you get a trial, you can cancel it any time during the trial, and then it'll just run the course of the trial and stop. You can cancel auto pay. You can, things like that. I sometimes to circumvent that stuff, I just use PayPal because I can go into PayPal and I can stop the payment from there. So I'm just like, well, I'm not going to go through your whole complicated system. I'm just going to stop the money from flowing. And then you'll automatically shut my account off. I don't know if that's good or not. Is that a dark pattern that I'm doing?
Well, yeah, you're the anti-consumer. You're creating, the company now has to think of a new way to capture your money. And so they're going to get more evil and more dark to get you caught.
Or they're going to sense that it's not working, right? And try something new.
We need to stop accepting PayPal. We'll need to go straight to Venmo or something like that.
So I think this kind of flows into that idea of what a user can do, right? Like, what can you be aware of and what is within your power to, prevent these things from taking any extra money that you're not intending them to.
Right.
So that's important. User education is important. Making sure that you know what you're signing up for, what you're putting your personal information like your email into, and getting a feel for a website before you start giving them money. Like, is it really hard to navigate? Is it hard to close stuff that you don't want to click into? Make sure that you're not subscribed or are subscribed, and there's an easy way to find that out. Making sure it's easy to find the cheaper options, as opposed to being pushed premium options, and making sure that things are written in a way that you can understand. So those are some key ways to know if what you're looking into is something that is not using a dark pattern. Those are some good indicators to look out for.
So MacBooks, if I want more memory, it's like you can't just get one with more memory. You have to go up to one that has more memory and a bigger hard drive and a bigger CPU, a bigger screen, and they give you more than you need or more than you want, so they can sell you a more expensive laptop.
They're helping you, Kyle.
They are helping. I'm sure
they're soldering that memory in there.
In their great benevolence, while they're secretly deleting the reminder off of Chad's phone to cancel that Apple subscription.
I don't know that the MacBooks are as great an example, though, right? Because they're selling you a wonderful design, right? Like this solid, screwless, I know what I'm getting into when I buy my MacBook. If I want something that's easily customizable and everything else, then yeah, I'll go to some other ecosystem. But
well, I mean, that now, Chad, but MacBooks haven't always had their RAM soldered in so that you couldn't add, buy it with 8 gig and then add 8 gig later or something like that. That's a fairly recent, it's probably 10 years, 5 years, something like that. Fairly recent development. And it's certainly caused consternation amongst some Mac owners that, I know if you're drinking the Kool-Aid tastes great and it's delicious and it's wonderful. But the manipulation or the ability to upgrade a laptop has gone.
Yeah, you're talking like the right to repair stuff and all of that, right?
Not just that, but
to upgrade to.
You can't change the battery in your phone very easily. You can technically do it, but it's not very easy. It used to be a consumer, stick your thumbnail under the edge, pop the back off, and put in a new battery.
Do you think though that's Apple or the device manufacturers trying to grab some more, every penny they can out of us? Or do you think that's us as consumers saying, this is beautiful hardware. I care about that more than I care about cracking it open, change the battery.
I think they've definitely gone to that beautiful hardware and are doing everything in their power to make it easier, right? So, Apple has just introduced the electric removable battery. I don't know if you've seen that, where you apply a current across 2 leads and then the battery adhesive will release itself from the case to make it a little bit more repairable, a little bit more replaceable. It's an interesting concept. Maybe not a dark pattern.
Yeah, that's the whole preventing you from fixing your own stuff, swapping out memory. When I see soldered, will not buy the laptop.
But the thing of it is it's not going to come loose, right?
Yeah, that they're helping us by not making it removable.
Looked at as a feature.
Hot glue, duct tape, they got it all in there. But that's, those things seem like they're dark patterns.
I would say it's more on, again, there is the option to not buy a Mac. There are options that don't have soldered in memory, right? And they tell you up front, while you're buying the product, what's going into it, right? And what you probably can't remove this thing, right? That I'm pretty sure they've updated the language to include that information to the user. So again, it's about being a knowledgeable user as well, right? There's some stuff on users' shoulders too when it comes to this kind of thing.
We don't get off scot-free, huh?
Right. Yeah. You still have to be adults when we're buying stuff. So there's still options out there. It's not manipulative to make you only do the one thing, if you think, making you think that that's the thing that you want, right? That's the key.
So if they didn't tell you it was soldered in.
That'd be a problem. Yeah.
Camille, so earlier you've already answered this once already, but I'm going to ask it again, kind of differently. The being forced to implement dark patterns, that's not a thing that you've had to experience quite yet. As a UX designer, have there ever been cases though where you were tempted by the dark side, where you're like, you know what, this is I do want to put a roadblock in front of the user for this action because we're trying to influence behavior. We're giving them a lot of features that they could really, shoot themselves in their foot with. So like some of the dark patterns that I glanced at yesterday after we talked about this seemed like things that you could implement to help, like, and maybe the terminology is all negative, right? It's like you're throwing a roadblock or you're right. Trying to manipulate or blah, blah, blah. And that all sounds so bad. But like, if you think about it, sometimes in my development, like I do want them to manipulate them. I want to give them a lot of options, but I want them directed towards, this one path, right? Mm-hmm. So I want to throw warnings up, right? Which might be a roadblock, but kind of maybe, I don't know, depending on how finely we cut and slice the terminology.
This is great. Good follow-up on this. I did want to touch on this too. So especially on the apps that, you and I have worked on, where there are complex workflows that a user is being led through, where it's not really like a 3-step buying process that you traditionally think of. There's lots of pieces of information going on. There's data entry involved, might be calculations, might be addresses, different types of data that are not necessarily connected directly to a user's purchase. And in those cases where a user is working through something, there are right and wrong answers about what they need to fill in or fill out or do a certain way, what could go wrong that they need to be involved in and understand. And so I'm going to go back to like the definition of dark patterns being manipulating the user to do something they don't want to do. So in the case of the things that you and I have worked on, typically what we're trying to do is manipulate the user to do the thing they want to do. They're trying to tell them what's the best path forward, right? And so I think that's where the difference lies, that we're not like going against what the user wants to see happen.
You're guiding them.
Right.
Yeah. We don't have any malicious intent with our manipulation, right? Like, we genuinely want what's best for them, and we're not trying to interject our opinion in what's best with, that's good.
We're looking at that complex workflow and saying, okay, how could this go wrong? And we want everything to be a happy path when we can, right? So where can we help?
That's like the typewriter, the QWERTY, we're deliberately slowing it down by moving the letters around, and so that the little arms wouldn't get stuck together. Like, that's the purpose. It's slowing it down on purpose, but it's not jamming as much. So it's like good and bad. I don't know if that's really a dark pattern.
Yeah, I mean, there's some weighing there that we have to do as product designers, as people involved in the development of these types of products, of like balancing the user's expectation, business requirements, and performance. And that's kind of that case of we're balancing, user expectations, what user wants to do is have a typewriter that works. And then performance issue of things crossing and like banging into each other and not working as well and needing to be repaired more. We need to balance those things out. So then we do need to make a change to the user's expected behavior and slow it down a little bit just so that they can have a better experience over time.
So go ahead, Peter.
Are there good dark patterns in, I'm thinking like internal software or something like that, where you're not necessarily consumer versus business, but your employee trying to, I do want to make it very hard for you to delete your entire hard drive. Or something like that, where you are slowing them down purposefully and painfully, and it seems like you really don't want them to do something. Are there cases for that, or that's not a dark pattern?
I could go either way on some of them, right? Like, so if truly we're trying to manipulate the employee to not being able to do what they want to do, And I guess we could put an asterisk on it in this case, that it's still a legal thing that the user wants to do, right?
Of course. Yeah.
Presuming that it's something they want to do and it's legal for them to do that, then the business has some concerns around certain actions. Of course, there's education that you want to provide the user of what they're doing. We don't want to misinform them that an action that they take would result in deleting their entire hard drive without them knowing that before they click the button.
Right.
And vice versa, right? So I think that there could be some sort of malicious intent with manipulating a user to see messages that say certain things that are not true, right? But putting in barriers to a user doing something that is what they want to do and legal is still within, I think, I would maybe like the gray side. It's not necessarily light. It's not necessarily completely dark, right? You still want to keep that transparency as much as you can between your employees and your employer, right? In ideal scenarios. But sometimes there are like things we want to do to make people really think about what they're doing. So I guess that's what I'd say. That's where things get a little bit like less cut and dry when we talk about dark patterns.
Yeah, I mean, Chad, you've probably had cases where you want to write something or make something impossible to do, but one person in the whole company needs to be able to do it, but you don't want to make it so accessible that everybody can. And, if you're not locking it down with security, you can lock it down with obscurity a little bit.
I think I've always followed the principle that, like, if it's out there, they're going to find it. So
yeah,
the role-based access is it's a trade-off, right? Because you don't want so many roles. They're so like you have to manage a dozen roles. Like I don't want to have a role for every button in my application.
Right.
But I mean, we can only take it so far, right? Like you can only do so much. At some point, somebody's still going to want to pull a trigger, right? And you're just hoping that it's aimed in the right direction. And if it's not, sorry. Boy, that was a gruesome reference. Sorry. That's
I mean, it's Halloween and we're dark, so I think that's
spooky.
Dark podcast. So the reputation hit that these companies have taken, like you were saying, Adobe and who is the other one? But it just makes you feel icky. It's like, I don't want to deal with them anymore. They're not a good partner. If that's how it's going to roll, if they're going to, stick it to me. I can't list all my users that are using a license and see the last time they've used it. I can't get that data from them.
Well, no, because then you might take it away from somebody.
Yeah. It's like, well, that's really not helpful. And that's really deliberate. And I've called them out on it a few times, and a few other things they have in place.
Do you have other software that you can see the last time somebody used and things like that?
I can see on Mural is a good one.
Okay.
Udemy, I think we can see who's using it and who's not.
That's true.
And, it's important. It's like, and they want you to pay for licenses, buy and pay for licenses. This is a occasional use thing. I don't want to license 210 people for something that's going to get used 10% of the time. So that capability, when we bring a new platform on, we look through all that stuff and make sure that we can do what we need to do. And to be honest, once you see those dark patterns with their stuff, you just sour on them immediately and think, is there a better way? Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's the thing I think of. That's the risk. So have you? Yeah. I looked at something and I saw a bunch of lawsuits.
Yeah. Before we get into that, I just want to mention there's also long-term effects that you might see. So I think a lot of times we think in the short term of, an individual consumer or customer not buying again from the company once they see these dark patterns and they kind of come to light or whatever. So yes, of course, there's that short-term effect. But in the long term, having dark patterns built into a sign-up process, a subscription process, whatever it might be, can make it more difficult to connect with other integrations in the future that are actually helping you grow the business or get bigger. So things like marketing funnels, connections to other pieces of software, building your process out a little bit. So that can make it more difficult to connect with those pieces to ensure compliance between the two, right? And to make it understandable, what kind of permissions each user has given, right? So that can make things harder down the line too. So that's my other warning for dark patterns. It's not just on an individual user level. but also on this much larger level once, God willing, the business grows, right?
Yeah.
So I'll just note that. Then we could talk about lawsuits.
I saw a lot of them. I don't remember exactly what they were and what they were about, but they were, I think, listed on that. What was it? Dark pattern dot. They had a lot of stuff. Because I knew this stuff existed, and I knew there was, I always called it like anti-usability, but I didn't really know that it was so prevalent and that there was such a big fight against it going on. And that made me feel good. Like, they're saying, no, we're not going to take this anymore. People are winning lawsuits over this stuff. I can see if, you leave something running too long. I don't know. Do you think there's dark patterns in pricing?
I think there's accidental dark patterns in cloud pricing. I think the awareness has certainly bubbled up in people's minds, and the cloud vendors themselves are providing tools that allow you to be notified, right? Like there's a reason, because there are times where users just leave the computer running and they don't even think about it. Like, oh no, when you leave it running in the cloud, also costing money to leave running, even if you're not doing anything with it.
It's hard to call that a dark pattern when they give you so many ways to prevent that from happening, right? Yeah. Like, I'm thinking AWS specifically, they give you reports, they give you budgets, they give you all these tools to help you not spend money.
Right.
With the intention of, like, I think they do want you to spend money. They don't want you to be afraid of it, but they want you to, spend what you can. They don't want to be perceived as Adobe or whoever.
Right. And it's working. I mean, we're using budgets, and they come to my mailbox and it tells me what they predict will be at if we just keep rolling the way we're rolling. And I look at those and it's like, okay, it's $20 more, and not a big deal. But then it went from 200 to 400 and something overnight. And that's when I learned about OpenSearch. And like, wow, that's kind of spendy. And I just, let people know, and because we're doing a contest or something. And yeah, you shut it off right away. It was so that we didn't actually have to pay it. There was really no penalty because the budget came in ahead of time. It was a forecasted amount, so you get time to react to it as well. So we're willing to let people play around in there because we have those tools. I've just heard so many horror stories from the early days of big costs.
I think there were some challenges early on, but it also led to the creation of the tools that we're talking about here.
Yeah.
To stop being perceived as a dark pattern, right? Like,
right.
Hey, you can go check your bill every day, but nobody does. So we'll give you a tool that will inform you via email that, hey, your bill's about to go up $200.
Did you see the, so I have a hard time calling, AWS is a $1 billion subsidiary of one of the largest companies in the world. And I have a hard time saying, like, they usually have the best intentions. They want to make a lot of money, but at least with those guys, there was a situation that came up recently where with folks that are doing static resource hosting in S3, right? And then every time a 404 happened, like if I hit somebody's thing and it generated a 301, one of the HTTP status codes, they actually build you for that because it's technically traffic to your bucket, even if the resource is not found. And if you had nothing to do, like for whatever reason. But AWS, like they're like, yeah, like the one guy had a post about being charged a few $1,000s because some of his content got popular. He removed the content so they didn't hit the bucket all the time, but the traffic was still there, and he's being charged for, something that he doesn't exist anymore.
For something that is sort of out of his control. Like, you can type anything at the end of the web address to try to get.
And I don't know that they necessarily refunded this guy, but they did change their policy. I was gonna back to Camille. Have you ever, like, as a designer, built out a product, right? Built out a design and then left for a little bit and then just like come back to it and peek and see all of these dark patterns everywhere? Like, see somebody just horrifically in your original beautiful utopia.
Well, I haven't personally seen necessarily dark patterns, but definitely coming back into products that have been developed and then seeing something that has like been a recent release. Sometimes there can be things that you kind of tilt your head at and go, okay, see, a change was made there. So not personally, but from, if I did see that, it kind of would depend on the relationship that I was involved in, right, in producing that work. So I'm someone who's a very big advocate for users. Obviously, being a UX researcher, kind of like that's my hat that I wear, my main one. So I try to advocate for if there are changes that are implemented that are, manipulative of users, to ensure that folks are aware at least of what's been implemented, right? And the dangers of it that we just talked about. Because sometimes there are, short-term upsides to these sorts of things, but just to be aware of them, right? Awareness is key.
I wonder
there
if
has
this
to be
is
an upside.
this must be a skill set that we hire for at SDG with our UX people, because you seem, and I work with our friend Allison too. You guys seem unable to say anything bad about anybody else. Like you just said it. Like I'll tip my head and question what was going on and what they were thinking, but I won't call them any bad names. Whereas I see something that I built, and I see this with previous companies that I've worked with. I'll see something that's online that I built, and I'll go to it once in a while, and it's like watching your girlfriend with another guy. I'm like, oh my god, what are you doing? Like, it's just, I get so frustrated, and I'll make a couple of I'll send a couple of quick text messages, be like, hey guys, did you really need to take? Yeah. Did you really need to paint my old Camaro purple? What are you doing there? So.
Yeah, I think, I don't know. I think for me, a lot of times the product that we're making is not like itself a sacred thing. Usually we're trying to achieve a goal together, right? So whether that's a user goal, business goal, both, we're trying to achieve some kind of goal and some kind of outcome from the process of making the software. And designing the software together. So that's always what's like sacred to me, is do we get to that goal that we're trying to get to? So the app itself, if it grows and changes, and I'm obviously, if I wasn't involved in it too, I can't say whether those decisions were made, with manipulative intent or whatever, because I wasn't in the room. So I think that's the tact that a lot of our UXers take is, it's not necessarily our product if we don't own it. So, we speak to what we can speak to.
Yeah. I see dark patterns everywhere now.
Oh no. I've opened your eyes.
I think of the desire to do that. You see an opportunity. Hey, you know what? If we put this on a, really low contrast, section of the page and hide this link, not many people are going to see it and click on it. So, but we can advertise this option, and we can, sell around it. And I think you see more of that in products that are built to be sold more than they're built to be used. And I think some of that is like good dark patterns. I see, the SharePoint modern stuff is what it is because people were breaking their sites and making them, impossible to migrate because of what they could do with the old way it was built. Yank pages away from the page layout, and now it's not associated with it. And now you've used a feature that's no longer supported, or change, like you can't apply CSS. They changed the CSS class names and IDs like every time you refresh the page. There's a whole system there to get you to stop messing with the stuff that's going to make the page look horrible when they push a change. So because it's in the cloud and they're kind of managing the features and making sure it all works together, it can seem like an anti-pattern. It can seem like they're locking you out, but really it's, this is a whole ecosystem and we have to keep it all working together. And if we give you these capabilities, then you're going to wreck it. And then you're going to call us and say, it's broken. What did you do to us? Right. So I can see that. And I can see that happened because in the cloud, they realized that they had to support it. They were the call for help. It wasn't your IT guy. I bet that was a wake up call for them.
And again, I think it's all about not misinforming your user. So as long as you know that you can no longer do that in SharePoint, it's not malicious to, to take that, issue and try and resolve it, right? You still need to balance, like we were just talking about, users' performance and business goals. And so that's part of that negotiation, right?
So I think we're getting down to the end here. Any parting thoughts? Any words of warning to our users as they go out in the world on this holiday season in Spookyville? and see all the dark patterns.
Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. There are lots of common sense things that users can do to protect themselves from these dark patterns, or maybe, protect your friends and family from, falling for a dark pattern. Always read your terms and conditions. Don't freely enter your information to every single website that you stumble upon. Don't feel shame for unsubscribing from a service that you don't want or don't use. And make notes like Chad did of when your free trial ends so that you can be prepared and you know how to cancel well before the date. And check your receipts for extra add-ons that you've been added to without your consent. And only provide personal info to websites that have clear language and are easy to navigate.
That covers all of it.
That list.
That's from the user side. I'm sure, you guys from business side or software side, anything that you'd like to add.
I was going to say that.
Go ahead.
Just because you see something, it's not necessarily a dark pattern. It's not necessarily an intentional thing, but they're certainly out there also. So
things are complicated. And, a lot of settings, configuration options, dependencies, it's pretty easy, I think, to get the idea that something is a dark pattern when it's just really, look, this is just difficult to do. This is a big thing you're working with.
Everything that Camille just said. Aggressively agree.
She's got my vote. Also election season. That's a dark pattern. All right. I think with that, we'll shut her down and we can say goodbye, everybody.
Goodbye, everybody.
Okay. Goodbye. Yeah. Thank you.
Solution Design Group is a digital product consultancy in Minneapolis. Check us out on the web at solutiondesign.com or look for us on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Instagram at Solution Design Group.